about a dream that dates back to 1937. It was had by a 17-year-old boy, and it caused quite a stir among the Pentecostal people at that time throughout America, because it was publicized in this magazine, Prophecies of Tomorrow. And I'd always just been able to get excerpts of it. Somebody said he said this and saw this and saw this. But the other day I was sitting up there in Canada, and a young boy began to ask me questions about the earthquake, because he'd heard my sermons on prophecy, and began to ask me, and one of them spoke up and says, "Well, you ever heard this?" And Danny O'Million is the one who did. He said, "Well, Brother Green, I know where that is." So they looked me up a copy of it that their father had way back a long time ago. Now I want to give you some dates on this so that you'll understand and try to get the feeling of it. 1906 is when the San Francisco earthquake occurred. You know, the one everybody talks about, the great San Francisco earthquake. Now, that one happened at the beginning of the year, and then right about that time, the Azusa Street revival happened also. Were you aware of that? That you know that they came together. There were some people then that felt that the earthquake in San Francisco was a sign from God, and that it caused people to be receptive to the gospel of Jesus Christ in Azusa Street. This young boy had an accident. He was riding his horse, and he fell off of the horse, and he was in the hospital. And he had a severe headache. I don't know whether he had a head injury or what it was, but this, the best that I can decipher it, he dreamed 4 nights in a row. And each night, a little bit more detail. Some of the things was repeated. So I want you to notice as I read this, keep in mind it was in 1937. And remember the things that were not available in 1937. That were not there, that he saw. Now, this created a stir in 1938 when it was published. But they didn't know then whether these things is going to be. But when you see now the things that he saw have come to pass, then we should look at it and says, well, he was someplace. Remember in the film, Deep Called Deep, Brother Branham said, you take a dreamer. He says, dream me a dream. You can't dream a dream if you want to. He said, now a seer says his subconscious knowledge right here, and said he can dream a dream with his eyes wide open. But some people have a deep subconscious, and they go to sound asleep, and they never dream a dream. But he said, if you dream a dream, there's part of you that's somewhere. That's another dimension. So let me try to give you this tonight in a few minutes. There's about 4 or 5 pages of it here, and let me just give it to you. He said, I was in the hospital room with a terrific headache, and he said it was as the whole world was revolving inside my brain. Vaguely the fall from my horse, Blackie. And as I lay there, pictures began to form in my mind. Pictures that moved with the speed of lightning, but pictures that stood still. I seemed to be in another world. Whether it was in the future or whether it was in some ancient land, I can't say. Then slowly, like the screen of the talkies, but with color and smell and sound. Remember, it was silent movies back then. I seemed to find myself in Los Angeles. It was Los Angeles. It was bigger, much bigger. There were buses and odd-shaped cars crowded the city streets. I thought about Hollywood Boulevard. And I found myself there on Hollywood Boulevard. Whether this is true, I don't know, but there was a lot of guys about my age, 17, but they had beards. And some of them were wearing earrings. All the girls wore short skirts, and they slouched along, moving like a dance. He said, I wondered if I could talk to them. I said, hello, but they didn't hear me or see me. I decided that I would look as funny to them as they looked to me. I tried for a while, but that crazy kind of walk, I guess it's something you have to learn. I couldn't do it. How many of you know what he's talking about now? I noticed there was a quietness, a kind of stillness, as if you could hear stillness. Something was missing, something that should be here. At first, I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what it was, but then I did. There were no birds. I listened. I walked 2 blocks north on the boulevard, past all the houses, but no birds. I wondered what had happened to them. Had they gone away? Where? It was so still I could hear the stillness. I'd never experienced anything like that, but I listened. Just stillness. Then I knew something was going to happen. I wondered what year it was. It certainly was not 1937. I saw a newspaper on the corner with a picture of the president. It wasn't Mr. Roosevelt. He was bigger, heavier, had big ears. If it wasn't 1937, I wondered what year it was. I looked at the mast of the headline, and I couldn't quite make it out, but it looked like 1969. I wasn't sure. My eyes weren't functioning on it, but something was coming, and it was. The nurse woke me up to take my temperature. I woke up thinking, what a crazy dream. The next night, he said, my headache is worse. It's a wonder I didn't get killed on that horse. I've had another crazy dream. It was back in Hollywood. I saw those people, and I wondered, why do they dress like that? I found myself back on the boulevard, but this time I was waiting for there was something to happen. Something big was going to happen, and I was going to be there. I looked up at the clock down by that big theater. It was 10 minutes to 4, 3:50 in the afternoon. That's where all the movie stars put their handprints and footprints and names and all. I recognized a few of them. The other names I'd never heard. Those crazy kids. Why are they all dressed like that? Maybe it's some Halloween doings or something. But it don't seem like Halloween. He had pretty good perception, didn't he? He said it was more like early spring. There was that sound again, that lack of sound. Stillness, stillness, stillness. He wondered, don't these people know that the birds have gone somewhere? The quiet is getting bigger and bigger. I know it's going to happen. Something's going to happen. It's happening now. And again, the nurse woke him up. The next night, he dreamed again. Where have I been? He said, rather, where haven't I been? I've been to the ends of the earth and back. I've been to the end of the world. There isn't anything left, not even Fresno, even though I'm lying right there this minute. So he was in the hospital in Fresno. If only my eyes would get a little clearer so I could write all this down. Nobody will believe me anyway. I'm going back to that last moment on the boulevard. He said there's some sweet kid went past, and he's talking about a girl that he saw. Said she was dragging little boys, twins, I guess, one by each hand. Her skirt was up, well, pretty high, and she had a tired look. I thought for a minute I could ask her about the birds, what had happened to them, and then I remembered she didn't see me. Her hair was all frizzy, way out all over her head. 1937, young girl, twins, miniskirt, looking like she's tired. You ever seen one under the influence? Frizzy hair. A lot of them I looked at looked like that, but she looked so tired and like she was sorry about something. I guess she was sorry before it happened, because it surely did happen. And there was a funny smell. I don't know where it come from. I didn't like it. A smell like sulfuric acid, a smell like death. For a minute, I thought I was back in chemistry class. When I looked around for the girl, she was gone. I wanted to find her for some reason. It was as if I knew something was going to happen and I could stay with her and help her. But she was gone, and I walked half a block, then saw the clock again. My eyes seemed glued on that clock. I couldn't move. I just waited. It was 5 minutes to 4 o'clock on a sunny afternoon. I thought I would stand there looking at that clock forever, waiting for the something to come. Then when it came, it was nothing. It was just nothing. It wasn't nearly as hard as the earthquake that we'd had 2 years before, and that's the one in 1935. The ground shook just an instant. People looked at each other, surprised. Then they laughed. I laughed too. So this was what I had been waiting for, this funny little shake. It meant nothing. I was relieved, and I was disappointed. What had I been waiting for? I started back up the boulevard, moving my legs like those kids. How did they do that? He said, I never found out. I felt as if the ground wasn't solid under me. I knew I was dreaming, and yet I wasn't dreaming. There was that smell again, coming like from the ocean. I was getting to the 5 and 10 Newberries, and I saw the look on the kids' faces. 2 of them were right in front of me, coming my way, both with beards and one with earrings. One said, let's get out of this place. Let's go back east. He seemed scared. It was as if the sidewalks were trembling, but you couldn't seem to see them. Not with your eyes, you couldn't. And an old lady had a dog, a little white dog, and she stopped and looked scared and grabbed him in her arms and said, let's go home, Fra. Mama's going to take you home. That poor little old lady hanging on to her dog. I got scared, real scared. I remembered the girl. She was way down the block, probably. I started to run. I ran, and the ground kept trembling. I couldn't see it. I couldn't feel it. But I knew it was trembling. Everybody looked scared. They looked terrible. One young lady just sat down on the sidewalk all doubled up. She kept saying, earthquake. It's the earthquake. Over and over. But I couldn't see that anything was different. Then when it came, how it came. Like nothing in God's world. Like nothing. It was like the scream of a siren, long and low, or the scream of a woman that I had heard giving birth when I was a child. It was awful. It was as if some monster was pushing up the sidewalks. You felt it long before you saw it, as if the sidewalks wouldn't hold anymore. Let me stop right here and tell you that we have a tape recording of an earthquake that happened in Caracas, Venezuela. A brother was dubbing one tape into another, Brother Galdonas, and the earthquake happened down there, which was about a 6.5, and he had the tape recorder running, just taking it from one recorder to another without a wire, and the earthquake came, and it does. At first it sounded like a siren coming, and when it got, the noise came to the highest peak, it sounded like about 10,000 motorcycles had passed, and you could hear it go off into the distance. I think we've still got that tape somewhere, but when I read this, I thought of that because I played that at the church years ago. He said, I looked out at the cars. They were honking. They just kept moving. They didn't seem to know yet that anything was happening. Then a little white car, baby, half-sized one, came sprawling from the inside lane right against the curb. 1937, all the cars were alike. But when he saw this, there was big ones and there was little baby cars. He said that baby half-sized one came sprawling from the inside lane right against the curb. The girl who was driving it just sat there. She sat there with her eyes staring as if she couldn't move. But I could hear her. She whimpered like a little girl. She made funny noises. I watched her, thinking of the other girl. I said that it was a dream and I would wake up, but I didn't wake up. The shaking had started again, but this time different. It was a nice shaking, like a cradle being rocked for a minute, and then I saw the middle of the boulevard. seemed to be breaking in two. The concrete looked as if it had been pushed straight up by some giant shovel. It was breaking in two. That's why the girl's car went out of control. And then a loud sound again, like I've never heard before. Then hundreds of sounds, all kinds of sounds. Children and women and those crazy guys with earrings. They were all moving, it seemed. Some of them above the sidewalk. I can't describe it. They were lifted up, and the waters kept oozing and oozing. The cries. It was awful. I woke up. I never want to have that dream again. The next night, he dreamed again. It came again. Like the first time, which was a preview, and all I could remember was that it was the end of the world. I was right back there with all that crying, right in the middle of it. My eardrums felt that they were going to burst, noise everywhere, people falling down, some of them badly hurt, pieces of buildings, chips flying in the air. One hit me hard on the side of the face, but I didn't seem to feel it. I wanted only to wake up, to get away from that place. It had been fun in the beginning, the first dream, when I kind of knew I was going to dream the end of the world or something, but this was terrible. There were older people in the cars. Most of the kids were on the street. But those old guys were screaming and hollering as if anybody could help them. Nobody could help them. It was then I felt myself lifted up. Maybe I had died, I don't know, but I was over the city. It was tilting toward the ocean like tilting a picnic table. The buildings were holding better than you could believe. They were holding. They were standing. The people who saw that the buildings and they tried to cling to them or get inside, it was fantastic. Like a building had a will of its own. Everything else breaking around them, and they were holding. I was up over them looking down. I started to root for them. Hold that line. I said, hold that line, hold it. I wanted to cheer, to shout, to scream. If the buildings held, those buildings on the boulevard, maybe the girl with the two kids, maybe she could get inside. It looked that way for a long time, maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes was like forever. Everybody was trying to get inside. They were going to hold. You knew they were going to hold, even if the waters kept coming up. Only they didn't. In 1937, they did not have building codes to satisfy earthquake. Now they do. Most of the buildings in Los Angeles now have been built to withstand earthquakes. And this boy had this dream about these buildings before they ever put that code in effect. He said, I've never imagined what it would be like for a building to die. A building dies just like a person. It gives way. Some of the bigger ones did just that. They began to crumble like an old man with palsy who couldn't take it anymore. They crumbled right down to nothing. And the little ones screamed like mad over and above the roar of the people. They were mad about dying, but the buildings died. I couldn't look anymore at the people. I kept wanting to get higher. I kept willing myself to go higher. Then I seemed to be out of it all, but I could see. I seemed to be up on top of Big Bear near San Bernardino. But the funny thing was that I could see everywhere. I knew what was happening. The earth seemed to tremble again. I could feel it, though, even though I was up high. This time it lasted maybe 12 seconds, and it was gentle. You couldn't believe anything so gentle could cause so much damage. But then I saw the streets of Los Angeles and everything between the San Bernardino Mountains and Los Angeles. It was all tilting toward the ocean. Houses, everything that was left. I could see the big lanes, dozens of big lanes, still loaded with cars. 5 lanes in some places, and all the cars sliding in the same way. No freeways in 1937. No 5-lane streets. 1937. Now the ocean was coming in, moving like a huge snake across the land. I wondered how late it was, and I could see the clock. Even though I wasn't there on the boulevard, it was 4:29. It had been half an hour. I was glad I couldn't hear the crying anymore, but I could see everything. Then, like looking at a huge map of the world, I could see what was happening on the land and with people. San Francisco was feeling it, but she was in no way like Hollywood or Los Angeles. I seemed to see it was the Garlic Fault, not just the San Andrews that was rocking San Francisco. It was moving just like that earthquake movie with Jeanette MacDonald and Clark Gable. I could see all those mountains coming together, the Sierra Nevada, San Andrews, and Garlic. I knew what was going to happen to San Francisco. It was going to turn over because of Garlic Fault. It would turn upside down. It went quickly because of the twisting. I guess it seemed much faster than Hollywood, but that I wasn't exactly there. I was a long way off. I shut my eyes for a long time, I guess 10 minutes, and when I opened them, I saw the Grand Canyon. When I looked at the Grand Canyon, the great big gap was closing in. Boulder Dam was being pushed from underneath. And then Nevada, and on up to Reno, way down south to Baja, California. Mexico, too. It looked like some volcano down there was erupting along with everything else. I saw the map of South America, especially Colombia. Another volcanic eruption, shaking violently. Venezuela seemed to be having some kind of volcanic activity. Way off in the distance, I could see Japan on a fault, too. It was so far off, not easy to see because I was still up on Big Bear Mountain, but Japan started to go into the sea. I couldn't tell time then, and the people looked like dolls far away. I could hardly see it. In a minute or two, it seemed over. Everybody was gone. Nobody was left. I didn't know time now. I couldn't see a clock. I tried to see the island of Hawaii. I could just see huge tidal waves beating against it. The people on the streets were getting wet, and they were scared, but I didn't see anybody going into the sea. I seemed way around the globe, more flooding. Is the world going to be drenched? Constantinople, Black Sea rising, Suez Canal for some reason seemed to be drying up. Sicily, she didn't hold. I could see the map. Mount Etna shaking. A lot of this area seemed to go, but it seemed to be earlier or later. I wasn't sure of the time now. In England, huge floods, but no tidal waves. Water everywhere, but no one going in the sea. People were frightened and crying. Some places they fell in the streets on their knees and started to pray for the world. I didn't know the English people were emotional, but Ireland and Scotland, all kind of churches were crowded. It seemed night and day. People were carrying candles, and everybody was crying for California. Nevada, parts of Colorado, maybe all of it, even Utah. Everybody was crying. Most of them didn't even know anybody in California. Nevada, Utah, but they were crying as if they had blood kin, like one family, like it happened to them. New York came into view. She was still there. Nothing had happened, yet water level was way up. Here things were different. People were running in the streets yelling, "End of the world." Kids ran into the restaurants and ate everything they could get their hands on. I saw a shoe store with all the shoes gone in about 5 minutes. Fifth Avenue, everybody running. You see that here what he did is he saw rioting and looting, which you didn't have in 1937. Some radio blasting from a loudspeaker that in a few minutes the power might be put off. They must control themselves. 5 girls were running like mad toward the YWCA, that place on Lexington or somewhere. They ran like they were scared to death. But nothing was happening in New York. I saw an old lady with garbage cans filling them with water. Everybody seemed scared to death. Some people looked dazed. The streets seemed filled with loudspeakers. It wasn't daylight, it was night. I saw like the next day, and everything was topsy-turvy. Loudspeakers again, about fuel tanks broken in areas, storage of oil. People seemed to be looting markets. I saw a lot of places that seemed safe and people were not scared, especially the rural areas. Here everything was almost as if nothing had happened. People seemed headed to these places, some on foot, some on cars, but some had run out of fuel. I heard, or somehow I know, but somewhere in the Atlantic, land had come up, a lot of land. I was getting awful tired, and I wanted to wake up, I wanted to go back and check on that girl to know where she was and those two kids. I found myself back in Hollywood. It was still 4:29. I wasn't up on Big Bear then. I was perched right over Hollywood. I was just there, and it seemed perfectly natural in my dream. I could hear now. I could hear someplace a radio station blasting out, telling people not to panic. They were dying in the streets. There were pictures, movies. Some right in Hollywood, they were carrying on with all the shaking. One fellow in the picture was a little short guy who could have been scared to death, but he wasn't. He kept shouting and reading instructions, something about some kind of a plane that hovers overhead that's coming over. Two things he saw: television, the pictures flashing, and helicopters, which wasn't in 1937. But I knew they couldn't. Things were happening in the atmosphere. The waves were rushing up now, such waves, nightmare waves. Then I saw again Boulder Dam going up, pushing together, breaking apart. No Grand Canyon, it was pushing together. Boulder Dam was breaking apart. It was still daylight. All these radio stations went off the same time. Boulder Dam had broken. I wondered how everybody would know about people back east. That was when I saw ham radio operators. I saw them in the oddest places. If I were right there with them, like a little guy with glasses that kept sounding the alarm. One kept saying, "This is California. We're going into the sea. This is California. We're going into the sea. Get to the high places. Get to the mountains. All states west. This is California. We're going to the." I thought he was going to say sea, but I could see him. He was inland, but the waters had come in. His hand was still clinging to the table. He was going to get up so that once again he could say, "This is California. We're going into the sea." I seemed to hear this over and over for what seemed hours, just those words. They kept it up to the last minute, all of them calling out, "Get to the mountains. This is California. We're going into the sea." I woke up. It didn't seem as if I had been dreaming. I have never been so tired. For a minute or two, I thought it had happened. I wondered about two things. I hadn't found out what happened to that girl. I'd been thinking about it. I'm going home tomorrow. It was just a dream. It was nothing more. Nobody in the future of Hollywood Boulevard is going to wear earrings and those beards. Nothing like that's ever going to happen. That girl was just so real to me. That girl with those two kids. It won't happen, but if it did, how could I tell her? Maybe she isn't even born yet. To move away from California when she has her twins, so she can't be on that boulevard that day. She was so real. The other thing, those ham operators hanging on like that, over and over, saying the same thing. "This is California. We're going into the sea. This is California. We're going into the sea. Get to the mountains. Get to the hilltops. California, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, Utah. This is California. We're going into the sea." He says, "I guess I'll hear that for the rest of my life." Well, it's just a dream. But let me tell you, I think it's going to happen like that someday. I think it's going to happen like that someday. And I want to know, are we going to be somewhere listening for our name? Or are you just going to say, "Well, it's just another earthquake"? No, it's going to be the last one. And I believe when that one happens, there's going to be a resurrection. And I'm not one prone to say this, but I don't think you'll be safe to wait until it happens to make things right with God. There's an awful lot of people preaching today, the Lamb's off of the mercy seat. And I believe that once God lets it begin to rain, I don't think anybody else got in the ark. And I don't see salvation, the faith of you being forgiven and cleansed of your sins, being of effect after judgment strikes the earth. I just think it breaks a pattern. Someday, I believe, God will show us as a people that it's going to happen.